It is my honor and my privilege to introduce Senator Pat Toomey with us here today. If you do not know, Senator Toomey has served 9 Congresses in both the House and the Senate, representing the great state of Pennsylvania. He's sought by colleagues, viewed for his expertise on financial reform, labeled by many and the Philadelphia Inquirer as the leading voice on money matters. During his tenure, he was a ranking member of the Senate Committee on Banking, active member on budget and finance committees, and in addition to his public service, he's active on the private side as well in financial services. He's the former president of the Club for Growth. He is a board of director of Apollo Global Management, and I'm very proud to claim that he is one of our 3 outside board members, so proud board member of Definiti. So welcome, Senator. Thank you very much for joining us today. I thought it would be great to have you here, given the last week's election, your experience, your deep experience in Congress, being a member with the current president-elect during his first term, your deep expertise on financial and fiscal policy. I thought it would be a great time to give our clients to be able to spend some time with you. So first and foremost, thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to you.
Well, thanks very much, Kristin, for having me. It's a pleasure for me to be here participating with Definiti Academy, and I am a proud member of your board, and I'm just delighted to be here.
Well, great. Well, so we literally have 3 questions, and just wanted to remind everyone that the Q&A is open. We'll see what we get, and if we get more questions, we will do some follow-up. But 3 that I thought would probably drive some really good conversation, and I'll just jump right into it. So obviously, had a big election last week. Results surprised probably many of us on the call. But if you think of last administration, right? We started the first 2 years, had a unified Democratic government, then a divided government. Now it looks like we'll have at least the first 2 years of a unified Republican government. You served in the House and in the Senate and had a diverse experience, various political majorities. So what should we expect as we roll into this next round with a Republican majority in both the House and Senate? Where will we see the focus? Where will we see the priorities? What insight can you share?
Yeah, so thanks for that. To state the obvious, any party would prefer to have all the parts of the elected government. It actually quite frequently does not occur, so it's a little bit unusual, but certainly not unprecedented. If you think about it from the point of view of a presidential election, if a president is running for re-election and wins re-election, if he could only choose one chamber to have a political alignment with, he'd probably take the House. But a new president would almost certainly take the Senate. And the reason why control of the Senate being in the same hands as control of the White House is so important is because it allows the confirmation of presidential appointees to go much more smoothly than if the opposite party has control, especially given the polarization that we have today. So that applies to the people that we're hearing about just in the last day or two as the president's selections to lead Health and Human Services and State Department and the various executive branch agencies, but it will also apply to judicial nominees. Having Republican control of the Senate and the White House together ensures a much higher likelihood that the president can get up and running most quickly. Now, of course, it looks almost 100% certain now that Republicans are also going to control the House. And so that creates a possibility that is, again, a little bit unusual, but really important. And that is, it gives both houses of Congress an opportunity to pass a bill, which will then enable subsequent legislation that deals with taxes, especially, to pass with a simple majority vote, right? Because the big hurdle in united government is a Senate that requires 60 votes to overcome a filibuster and to pass legislation of most kinds, right? Republicans are very likely to have 53 Republican senators, not 60. And so it's going to be tough to get bipartisan legislation done. Not impossible, but it's going to be tough. One of the big exceptions to that 60 vote requirement is tax-related policies if certain fairly complicated procedures have been achieved. So to the part of your question about what can we expect, I think we can expect right out of the blocks, first of all, the president will issue quite a number of executive orders. He will reverse many of the Biden orders, which in fact were reversals of his prior executive orders. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of that going back and forth. But on the legislative front, I think we're going to see a very concerted effort in both the House and the Senate to pass what's called a reconciliation bill. It will define the size of any tax policy changes. And the reason that's so important right now, of course, is because the 2017 tax reform has many elements that are going to expire next year. There's going to be an interest in extending most of the expiring provisions. Some of them probably won't be extended, and there will be other completely unrelated tax provisions that will be in the mix, I'm sure. But that's going to be item number one, I think, on the legislative agenda. Don't be surprised if the president's tariff proposals make their way into this package, because a tariff is a tax on imports, and so it qualifies for consideration in this package. There are areas where I think over the course of next year, we will see bipartisan cooperation because there's a very strong history of that. One is the annual National Defense Authorization Act, which specifies the priorities for our military. Another is the annual appropriations bills, which have tended to work better in the Senate than in the House, but one way or another, there'll be funding of the government. And one other point I'll mention that may not be on most people's radar, but I think it's likely to happen, is the government is probably going to pass legislation that will define the regulatory parameters for crypto, Bitcoin and stable coins and other crypto, which is a fascinating new technology that is currently not under any well-defined regulation, and so the development of the technology is a bit impeded by that. So anyway, there'll be other areas, but that would be my sense of some of the early priorities and some of the things we should expect.
Well, that's fascinating. Thank you for that. I think, another area that I think would be of interest to many of the participants on today's call is Social Security. Obviously, universal federal government retirement program, I think many of us would agree, not nearly enough in terms of benefit and or funding to drive the benefit. We know that there tends to be bipartisan agreement around this topic, but what do you see around focus, agreement, or additional conversation activity there?
Yeah, so I think the big picture is that this is a really important program. As you point out, Social Security benefits are not sufficient for most retirees, but they're an important component of most retirees' income. And unfortunately, because of congressional and presidential neglect for many years now, the program is on an unsustainable path. And by that, I mean the promises that are implicit in the benefit structure cannot be honored by the payroll taxes that are coming in. And contrary to most private sector plans, I say most, certainly not all, but contrary to most private sector plans, this is not pre-funded. There are no assets earning income for the purpose of honoring Social Security benefit commitments. It's what we call a pay-as-you-go program. The payroll taxes that the government collects continuously from the workforce goes to pay the current benefits. There's already a shortfall. In other words, every month, the federal government sends out more in Social Security benefit checks than it collects in payroll taxes in the combination of the employer contribution and the employee contribution. And that deficit is getting wider really pretty much every month. So that needs to be fixed. We have not seen the political will in Congress or in the White House, frankly, to make the reforms necessary to fix that. But every member of Congress is aware that there's a problem here. And honestly, it's been that backdrop, that awareness that we have this problem with the federal government's retirement program has been a sort of a motivator to some degree to pass various bills that have been designed to encourage private sector retirement plans, the kind of plans that you help your plan sponsors with. Because there's kind of an awareness that Social Security, it's not enough if it were fully funded, and it's not fully funded. So we better encourage people to have an alternative. So we saw the Secure Act, we saw Secure 2.0, all bipartisan efforts to encourage more private sector plans and participation in plans to deal with this need in retirement. I think that is going to continue to be something Congress will be interested in.
There was we had many industry conversation actually. A lot of the content we have is, of course, the next 2 days is really centered around Secure 2.0 and just readiness and things that clients need to consider and things that Definiti is doing on their behalf.
Kristin, my apologies. My apologies, Kristin. It does sound as though we're having an audio issue again. If you might want to just toggle your audio and see if we can try to get that cleared up. Senator Toomey, were you able to glean a question or know about where we wanted to go next with this conversation?
I think I'm guessing perhaps Kristin was wondering about what the prospects and what the outlook is for some subsequent legislation, and if that's right, Kristin, I'll take a shot at that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so I think the answer is yes, there is going to be subsequent legislation that will be meant and designed to further encourage the creation of plans and the participation of workers in existing plans, but it's a question of when. My sense from speaking with folks on the Hill and speaking with folks in the industry who follow this very closely is that we're at the early stages of developing some of the ideas that might enhance participation, enhance the creation of new plans, but it's probably not likely to occur next year. The year after becomes much more possible. After that, more likely still. But it's to some degree, there's this sense that we're still trying to digest Secure 2.0, right? The rulemakings that have just gone into effect, industry taking into account and complying with this. It all takes a little bit of time, and my guess is it probably takes a little more than a year to be ready and to have a consensus on what to do in the next iteration of retirement legislation.
Thank you for that. What's my audio? Is my audio okay?
Oh, thank you. It is still a little problematic. So we are going to shift just a little bit while Kristin is able to address that. Because one of the things that we've been talking about, and I'll come on camera so you can see me, folks. One of the things that I know we talked about earlier in terms of this particular audience and in your background, it was a question that we thought might come up a little bit later, but we'll go ahead and address it here. As a small to mid-sized employer, like many of our employees, perhaps, or plan sponsors on this call, one of their concerns are about healthcare costs continuing to be one of the greatest challenges. So what are your thoughts on how the administration shift might really impact those costs? Is there anything that you think is coming down the pike that would be beneficial for them? Anything they should be considering as they're looking towards 2025? benefit plans? Anything that you might add to the conversation?
It's really hard to say at this point, Elke. One of the developments that will give us, I think, a little bit better insight is when we get the nominees, when we know who's going to be leading the main healthcare agencies of the federal government, Health and Human Services being maybe the most important one. There are also some key White House positions that deal with healthcare. There are some perennial issues that might very well make some progress. I'm thinking some controversies in the pharmaceutical space. For instance, the ease with which generic drugs can be brought to market as a competitor to help lower the cost of medicines. Medicines becoming such a huge factor in overall healthcare. But until we have a little better idea of the personnel, I think it's a little hard to know exactly what direction that's going to take.
Absolutely. I do see Kristin is back, so we'll give this another shot. Kristin, would you like to proceed with your next question?
Yeah, I'm happy to if my audio is working.
It sounds great. Yes, thanks for your perseverance.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you for stepping in, Elke, and for everyone's patience. We will promise to everyone we tested audio 10 times, but, we'll just roll with it. We do have a couple more questions, and I know about 8 minutes to go. So thank you, Elke, for stepping in. But one that came in that, is actually a fair question. So it's been a whirlwind and emotions are high given election and where we landed. So if you were the president or the president of the Senate, what would you do to lower the temperature and get things moving? Thought that was a great question.
I think the important thing is to make it very, very clear that we're looking forward. The president, Congress, it's not going to be about relitigating old disputes or relitigating election outcomes, or even what many people think are abuses of the legal system. Like that should be behind us for the sake of the country. We're looking forward, both and Congress and the president it's a Congress and a president for all Americans. And about half of Americans voted for the folks who are in office, and about half voted against them. Mm-hmm. There's no way that we make progress as a country if we're thinking that we only represent. I say we. I'm not there anymore, but speaking for my colleagues, nobody should think that they're representing half of their constituents. Everybody's got to be thinking about representing everybody. We have become, I think, much more polarized than is healthy, than is optimal in our society. So just the president speaking out on this, when the Republicans select a Senate leader, which is likely to happen tomorrow, that would be a really important message that we're going to be coming together to serve every last American.
That's great. Thank you for that. There's here's a question. I didn't know you were on the board of Definiti. This may actually be from someone internally. So why Definiti?
Because I was intrigued by the business model, by the business plan. I think this is a company that has tremendous potential, because I do think there are going to be ever more small and medium-sized businesses launching retirement plans if they don't have them already. There'll be more participation, and providing the services that people need, plan sponsors and retirees and workers that want to have a comfortable retirement. It's just a really, really important part of our economy and our society, especially as we discussed a moment ago, given the challenges facing Social Security. So I was delighted to be given a chance to make my contribution to what I think is a really important economic activity.
Great. Well, of course, we're very pleased to have you a part of it. Another question around, and this actually surfaced at the industry conferences as well, around, and you may not have your hands around this, but AI, so artificial intelligence and its footprint or its involvement in delivering services in the retirement space or financial services space. Do you have any perspective on how much of a focus it will get, or a concern of Congress at this point?
So not at a granular level, Kristen, not in a terribly specific way, but my general take on AI is that we're already seeing a lot of activity, a lot of entrepreneurship around applying AI to enhance productivity. I don't think we're seeing like wholesale categories of workers being replaced by computers. I don't see that happening now. I don't think it's going to happen in the near future, but I do think it's increasingly becoming a tool that people can use in a variety of ways. It is a very impressive technology. It's going to take a massive amount of energy. We've got a challenge in this country. We lead the world in AI at this point, but the demands for electricity generation are so huge that it's going to be a real challenge for us because we already have a pretty heavily burdened electrical grid. But it's in our national interest to continue to play a leadership role in this, to continue to enhance worker productivity, and that leads to higher wages and a more successful economy. So I'm bullish on what AI is going to do, but we'll need to keep an eye on it to make sure that people's privacy is protected and data is protected. So it'll be something I think the government's going to be actively engaged in going forward.
Okay, great. That great similar perspective. Another question from the audience: what might not have perfect context here, but what legislative protections are currently in place to prevent political interference with American retirement accounts? Might have some perspective there.
Well, the way I think about it is, right now, I don't think there's legislation. There are no statutes that I'm aware of that would direct how retirement savings get invested. There are safeguards that are in place. There are fiduciary obligations that are in place. There are, there are prudent measures of diversification of risk, things like that. But what we don't want to see happen is a government that says, these industries are off limits. These industries are to be favored. I think that would be entirely inappropriate, and it would not well serve workers, because it will inevitably mean lower returns and therefore less resources in retirement. So there is, I think the statutes are properly silent on how funds should be invested. That should stay that way. I think there's a political consensus for that now generally, but that's something that I think people should make sure that Congress stays that way. There are some people who would actually prefer to have the government put its finger on the scale and decide what industries should be invested in and which ones should be shunned. I think that'd be a very bad idea.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Well, I appreciate that opinion, and I will sneak in one last question, and this did come through, but as a retired U.S. Senator, any plans to come out of retirement? Would you ever consider running?
That's an easy one. The answer is no. I'm retired. I spent 18 years in elected federal office. I'll always be tremendously grateful to the people of Pennsylvania who gave me the chance to serve in both the House and the Senate. I enjoyed my time there. But, Kristin, I've analogized it in some ways to my 4 years in college. I enjoyed college enormously, but at the end of 4 years, I wasn't looking for a fifth year. And I just decided this was time for me to move on, give someone else a chance. And I'm very happy with my decision. I've been out of office now almost 2 years, and I have no plans whatsoever to going back. And in any case, my wife wouldn't allow it. So it's definitely not going to happen.
Well, we appreciate your contribution on the private side, your active participation on our board, and the personal support you have provided me. So thank you so much for joining us today.